Hello everyone, good evening. We hope you already had an insightful and interesting afternoon and day. We will continue this evening by reading some poems by human rights defenders as well as by people who have suffered from human rights violations. The time is now to take the tea bag out of your goodie bag, to warm up some water for a nice cup of tea. We will read 8 poems today, and we will give a short introductions before we read the poem. We have picked out some poems from quite globally, from all different parts of the world. And in general, they are about human rights and humanity. And we also want to say, please be aware that some of the poems can contain sensitive topics and they may invoke strong feelings. We will start by the first poem. The first poem is written by Ariel Dorfman. Ariel Dorfman is a Chilean writer, a teacher, a novelist, an essayist, and it goes on and on. He was born in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and then when at the age of 2, he had to flee with his parents to United States. He stayed there a long time. Then he came back to Chile, and he had to flee again, because his father was always critical of the regime. So in Chile, he had to flee again because of Pinochet. Then he went to the Netherlands, France, so he's really a global citizen. In the end, he is now a teacher in the Duke University, but he always writes about Latin America politics in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, and he also teaches about it, about war, human rights, and cultural hegemony. This poem that I'm going to read is called Last Will and Testament. When they tell you I'm not a prisoner, don't believe them. They will have to admit it someday. When they tell you they released me, don't believe them. They will have to admit it's a lie someday. When they tell you I betrayed the party, don't believe them. They will have to admit I was loyal someday. When they tell you I'm in France, don't believe them. Don't believe them when they show you my false ID. Don't believe them. Don't believe them when they show you the photo of my body. Don't believe them. Don't believe them when they tell you the moon is the moon. If they tell you the moon is the moon, then this is my voice on tape. That this is my signature on a confession. If they say a tree is a tree, don't believe them. Don't believe anything they tell you, anything they swear to you, anything they show you. Don't believe them. And finally, when that day comes, when they ask you to identify the body, and you see me, and a voice says, "We killed him, the poor bastard died, he's dead." When they tell you that I am completely, absolutely, definitely dead, don't believe them. Don't believe them. Don't believe them. Okay, that was the first poem.
So now I brought something from Portugal, and I want to talk to you about Sofia de Melbrenner. She was a prominent Portuguese poet. She won lots of prizes. She was part of the resistance during our dictatorship that ended in '74. And after, she was the only woman who participated in the writing of our current constitution. So she was a great advocate for cultural rights. And before I bring you some of her work, I want to read to you something that she said in our Constitutive Assembly. In an assembly full of men, she was defending a whole class of artists and cultural freedom. And she said this out of a bigger speech. In a country and a world where there are families without houses and sick people without treatment in hospitals, the question of artistic and intellectual freedom may seem like a secondary issue. But we know that culture influences radically the social and political structure. And that is why the question of the liberty of culture is a primary issue. And we know that real culture works for the liberation of man, and for that, all real culture is revolutionary. Culture does not exist to decorate life, but to transform it. For the man to be able to build him and to build himself in conscience, in truth, in liberty, and justice. And if man is able to create a revolution, it is exactly because he's able to create culture. Having said this, I want to show you a part of the movie that was made by another prominent Portuguese filmmaker about her life, in which she reads part of her writings and she reflects on justice and freedom.
A coisa mais antiga de que me lembro é de um quarto em frente do mar, dentro do qual estava, poisada em cima de uma mesa, uma maçã enorme e vermelha. Do brilho do mar e do vermelho da maçã, erguia-se uma felicidade irrecusável, nua e inteira. Não era nada de fantástico, não era nada de imaginário. Era a própria presença do real que eu descobria. Mais tarde, a obra de outros artistas veio confirmar a objetividade do meu próprio olhar. Em Homero reconheci essa felicidade nua e inteira, esse esplendor da presença das coisas. E também a reconheci, intensa, atenta e acesa, na pintura de Amadeu de Sousa Cardoso. Dizer que a obra de arte faz parte da cultura é uma coisa um pouco escolar e artificial. A obra de arte faz parte do real e é destino, realização, salvação e vida. Quem procura uma relação justa com a pedra, com a árvore, com o rio, é necessariamente levado pelo espírito de verdade que o anima a procurar uma relação justa com o homem. Aquele que vê o espantoso esplendor do mundo é logicamente levado a ver o espantoso sofrimento do mundo. Aquele que vê o fenómeno quer ver todo o fenómeno. É apenas uma questão de atenção, de sequência e de rigor. E é por isso que a poesia é uma moral. E é por isso que o poeta é levado a buscar a justiça pela própria natureza da sua poesia. Como Antígona, o poeta do nosso tempo diz: eu sou aquela que não aprendeu a ceder aos desastres. Mesmo que fale somente de pedras ou de brisas, a obra do artista vem sempre dizer-nos isto, que não somos apenas animais acossados na luta pela sobrevivência, mas que somos, por direito natural, herdeiros da liberdade e da dignidade do ser.
Okay, so from the first powerful female, we go to the next 10. We have a poem by Roshan Shire. She was born in Kenya, but her parents were Somali, and now she lives in London. In 2009, she wrote Conversations About Hope, a piece inspired by a visit she made to the Somali embassy in Rome, which now is being used by young refugees that they turned like into their own home. And in an interview, she told a reporter the night before she visited the young Somali, one of them jumped off the roof. And she also told the interviewer that she wrote the poem for them, for my family, and for anyone who has experienced or lived around grief and trauma in that way. So this experience became her basis for the next poem, which is called Home. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run from the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body.
You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burns threads into your neck, and even then you carried the anthem under your breath. Only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you won't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat, unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck, feeding on newspaper, unless the miles traveled mean something more than the journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison, because prison is safer than a city of fire. And one prison guard in the night is better than a truckload of men who look like your father. No one could take it. No one could stomach it. No one's skin would be tough enough. The go home blacks, refugees, dirty immigrants, asylum seekers, sucking our country dry. With their hands out, they smell strange, savage, messed up their country and now they want to mess ours up. How do the words, the dirty looks, roll off your backs? Maybe because the blow is softer than a limb torn off. Or the words are more tender than 14 men between your legs. Or the insults are easier to swallow than rubble, than bone, than your child's body to pieces. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun. And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs. Leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown. Save. Be hungry. Beg. Forget pride. Your survival is most important. No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear, saying, leave. Run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here.
After this touching poem, we move on to John McGray. He wrote the poem In Flanders Fields. It's a very famous poem, so you may have heard of it. John McGray was a Canadian. He served as a surgeon during the First World War, and he wrote this poem in remembrance for his, because of the death of his close friend. And the rumor says he wrote it in 20 minutes. But this poem became actually the symbol for the First World War, for both Commonwealths, like British, Canadian, and the whole Commonwealth. And the poppy, he mentions poppy, and poppy is like this red flower you see in Flanders Fields. And this poppy became the symbol of First World War. So in British television in Canada, you see people wearing it here. And this is because of this poem. Yeah. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly. Scars hurt amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, fell down, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from falling hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields. The next poet is a German-Romanian writer. He wrote about the Second World War, so we are really in the war zone now. It's a description of horror and death in a concentration camp and the mental issues that it evokes. Both of his parents died in the concentration camp, and he also worked in the concentration camp, but he managed to flee away. But he had a very troubled life. He also lost one of his daughters, and in the end, he committed suicide. We will hear the poem in German, as I thought it was best, but normally you have the English translation. He also reads it himself, so you hear the poet.
Todesfuge. Schwarze Milch der Frühe, wir trinken sie abends, wir trinken sie mittags und morgens, wir trinken sie nachts, wir trinken und trinken. Wir schaufeln ein Grab in den Lüften, da liegt man nicht eng. Ein Mann wohnt im Haus, der spielt mit den Schlangen, der schreibt, wenn es dunkelt nach Deutschland, dein goldenes Haar, Margarete. Er schreibt es und tritt vor das Haus, und es blitzen die Sterne, er pfeift seine Rüden herbei, er pfeift seine Juden hervor, lässt schaufeln ein Grab in der Erde. Er befiehlt uns, spielt auf nun zum Tanz. Schwarze Milch der Frühe, wir trinken dich nachts, wir trinken dich morgens und mittags, wir trinken dich abends, wir trinken und trinken. Ein Mann wohnt im Haus, der spielt mit den Schlangen, der schreibt, wenn es dunkelt nach Deutschland, dein goldenes Haar, Margarete, dein aschenes Haar, Sulamit. Wir schaufeln ein Grab in den Lüften, da liegt man nicht eng. Er ruft, stecht tiefer ins Erdreich, ihr einen, ihr anderen spielt weiter zum Tanz auf. Er greift nach dem Eisen im Gurt, er schwingt, seine Augen sind blau. Stecht tiefer die Spaten, ihr einen, ihr anderen spielt weiter zum Tanz auf. Schwarze Milch der Frühe, wir trinken dich nachts, wir trinken dich mittags und morgens, wir trinken dich abends, wir trinken und trinken. Ein Mann wohnt im Haus, dein goldenes Haar, Margarete, dein aschenes Haar, Sulamite, er spielt mit den Schlangen. Er ruft, spielt süßer den Tod, der Tod ist ein Meister aus Deutschland. Er ruft, streicht dunkler die Geigen, dann steigt ihr als Rauch in die Luft. Dann habt ihr ein Grab in den Wolken, da liegt man nicht eng. Schwarze Milch der Frühe, wir trinken dich nachts, wir trinken dich mittags, der Tod ist ein Meister aus Deutschland. Wir trinken dich abends und morgens, wir trinken und trinken. Der Tod ist ein Meister aus Deutschland, sein Auge ist blau. Er trifft dich mit bleierner Kugel, er trifft dich genau. Ein Mann wohnt im Haus, dein goldenes Haar, Margarete. Er hitzt seine Rüden auf uns, er schenkt uns ein Grab in der Luft. Er spielt mit den Schlangen und träumet. Der Tod ist ein Meister aus Deutschland. Dein goldenes Haar, Margarete. Dein aschenes Haar, Sulamit.
So after this first session of poems, we will now go to some music. This music you will hear is played by the Western Eastern Divan Orchestra. So this orchestra, it has the aim to bring people from all cultures together, especially the Middle East. So you have musicians from Israel, musicians from Palestine, from Jordan, from Lebanon, who play the music, and it's led by Daniel Barenboim, the conductor, the famous conductor, and the name is also called after an anthology of poems by Goethe. We only will hear it for 2 minutes.
So this was beautiful. Now I bring you something from an Indian girl in her mid-20s. Her name is Nikita Gill. She was born in Haryana and she migrated to South England and worked for the rest of her life as a carer. The poem stands by. Girl, you are born with a fire inside you, and this world is determined to stamp it out. You will see it when you stand up for yourself and you are told it isn't ladylike to raise your voice. You will hear it when you wear something that hugs your body and feel the uncomfortable sensation of being stripped naked by the eyes of men who call you names you are still too young to understand. You will know it when a man tries to use his strength to have his way with you for the first time and you need to use your fists, teeth, legs to get him off. You will understand it when you see your mother's eyes filled with terror because you are an hour later than you said you will be home. But you must never let them take those flames from within your soul. Instead, you must burn brighter than ever because you are a daughter of the sun and you belong only to yourself, not to this world.
Mariana. So we're already to our last poem, but this is from the famous Maya Angelou. She was an American author, actress, screenwriter, dancer, poet, and also, most importantly, a civil rights activist. You might know her novel, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which made literary history as the first non-fiction bestseller by an African American woman. She also received many honors during her career, and the poem I'm going to read now was composed as a poem for the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, and it has a more optimistic tone. And she said in her speech that it was written for all the people on the earth. It's called A Brave and Startling Truth. We, this people, on a small and lonely planet, traveling through casual space, past aloof stars across the way of indifferent suns, to a destination where all signs tell us it is possible and imperative that we learn a brave and startling truth. And when we come to it, to the day of peacemaking, when we release our fingers from fists of hostility and allow the pure air to cool our palms, when we come to it, when the curtain falls on the minstrel show of hate, and faces suited with scorn are scrubbed clean, when battlefields and Colosseum no longer rake our unique and particular sons and daughters, up with the bruised and bloody grass to lie in identical plots in foreign soul, when the rapacious storming of the churches, the screaming racket in the temples have ceased, when the pennants are waving gaily, when the banners of the world tremble stoutly in the good clean breeze, when we come to it, when we let the rifles fall from our shoulders and children dress their dolls in flags of truce, when landmines of death have been removed and the aged can walk into evenings of peace, when religious ritual is not perfumed by the incest sense of bringing flesh, and childhood dreams are not kicked awake by nightmares of abuse. When we come to it, then we will confess that not the pyramids, with their stones set in mysterious perfection, nor the gardens of Babylon, hanging as eternal beauty in our collective memory, not the Grand Canyon, kindled into delicious color by western sunsets, nor the Danube, flowing its blue soul into Europe, not the sacred peak of Mount Fuji, stretching to the rising sun. Neither Father Amazon nor Mother Mississippi, who without favor nurture all creatures in the depths and on the shores. These are not the only wonders of the world. When we come to it, we, this people, on this minuscule and kidless globe, who reach daily for the bomb, the blade, and the dagger, yet who petition in the dark for tokens of peace. We, this people, on this mote of matter, in whose mouths abide cankerous wounds, which challenge our very existence. Yet out of those same mouths come songs of such exquisite sweetness that the heart falters in its labor, and the body is quieted into awe. We this people, on this small and drifting planet, whose hands can strike with such abandon, that in a twinkling life is sapped from the living. Yet those same hands can touch with such healing, irresistible tenderness, that the haughty neck is happy to bow, and the proud back is glad to bend. Out of such chaos, of such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines. When we come to it, we, this people, on this wayward, floating body, created on this earth, of this earth, have the power to fashion for this earth a climate where every man and every woman can live freely, without sanctimonious piety, without crippling fear. When we come to it, we must confess that we are the possible, we are the miraculous, the true wonders of this world. That is when, and only when, we come to it.
Okay, this is actually the end already of this session. We are so grateful for all the people who joined. We hope you had a beautiful first day of human rights. It was inspiring. Maybe you look up another poem, maybe you listen to some music, you watch into the films, or you just enjoy your evening. And we hope to see you back tomorrow. Stay tuned.
Bravissime!